So we've been talking about Russia, Ukraine, and all of that. And there's this sort of idea that we're fighting for, or Biden has put it quite simply, there is a battle between autocracies and democracies. And what I find so interesting in the media landscape is within the US is how the right wing is trying to position the Biden administration as though it's trying to implement an autocracy. But the irony is that that's what we saw with Donald Trump's administration. And it's almost like they're trying to point fingers at autocrats. I wonder if it's a thing that they've always just accused every US president of trying to be an autocrat. But there seems to be a rise in a push or in a narrative that autocracies are trying to take over the West like a tsunami. There seems to be this narrative that we see, and I kind of want to talk about that, this sort of like potentially looming scary concept. One thing I will say about Ukraine, there's this, what I call a lie, there's this narrative that the Biden administration or the US, I'll say the US, is trying to push that supporting Ukraine means supporting democracy, right? Or supporting freedom. And this is sort of a lie that they're spewing and they're pushing around the world. And I'm not somebody that's going to take Fox News and say, there are a lot of things I do not agree with that I hear at Fox News, but at the same time, I like to say I'm in the middle. I'm not on the left. I'm not on the right. I'm in the middle. And I could see both sides. So Fox News has just broken down how Ukraine is not a true democracy. And so in another video, I broke down the fact that the agenda for the US to push against Russia in Ukraine or to support Ukraine, I don't think it has anything to do with the fight for autocracy and democracy. I think that's a narrative that the Biden administration is using to justify, entry into this war. I won't call it entry, but to justify supporting Ukraine with $13 billion, a ridiculous number. But I do not believe for 1 second that Ukraine is a representation of any sort of model democracy. And I do not believe that they're supporting them because of that narrative that they're pushing. Now, why are they supporting them? I don't know. That's the real deep question. And hey, their rationale for supporting Ukraine could be very important and a matter of national security. It could be. It could be the fact that they don't want Russia to get more powerful or more ballsy. That might just be the reason. But I don't think it's necessarily specifically about supporting democracy when Ukraine is not a true democracy. But that aside, I'm talking about the looming threat of an autocratic government within the United States. That is scary. So I saw this interesting documentary by 60 Minutes, and they talked about how Donald Trump is trying to push and create an autocracy. And I think that might be a tactic that the media is using to fearmonger us against or to create further division between the left and the right, to fearmonger us. But when I saw this, it was an Australian company, Australian 60 Minutes, and they broke this down. You guys have to go watch that documentary. It's pretty scary the way they've positioned Donald Trump, and I'm going to put some excerpts so you can see. And even before that, during COVID, there were a lot of articles that talked about Trump trying to be an autocratic leader. I mean, I remember when he said the president's control is total. I'll put the clip in here.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
You said when someone is president of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true. Who
Okay,
told
you know
that?
what we're going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary. Go ahead, please.
But who told you the president has the total authority?
Enough.
So Donald Trump is scary, and I do not want him anywhere near any kind of position of power. But the idea, the looming threat, I do believe if anyone's going to try to push an autocracy, it would be Donald Trump. And this idea of this looming threat of him coming into power, and potentially because he admires he loves to praise Putin. If we give him another position in power, is he going to fight and try to stay longer? Can you see this sort of stubbornness that he has, that he's campaigning right now? Who campaigns 4 years before their election? Like, I get why he's doing it, because it's going to make him even bigger by the time he runs, if the Republican Party allow him to run. We just hope that they don't. But he seems to be so powerful. So it's kind of this looming threat that we could potentially see. And there are these claims that, I know Charlemagne the God broke this down on the Breakfast Club, that part of the reason why Kanye West ran for the election is because they were trying to steal Democratic votes through Kanye West. So the fewer Democratic votes that come out, that increases Trump's potential of winning. So some people are just not going to support Donald Trump, but he can still capture Biden's votes by funding Kanye West's campaign. This is a claim, Charlemagne the God, very credible source, broke this down, and I'll play the clip. But there's this looming threat of Donald Trump taking over. And if Donald Trump does take over, there's an even scarier threat that he will turn America into an autocracy. Now, why is that scary? Because I think about, well, first of all, I probably break down another video, the scary truth about autocracies, just the controlled speech, controlled living, like China's social crediting system. That's a whole different video I'll break down. But the way that autocracies control the people's lives, they take away your freedoms, your basic human rights, what I consider freedom to be a human right. I don't want to live in a world where I have to control my speech. How would I even sit in front of the camera and speak my mind? I don't want to do that. So I think a lot of Americans, a lot of people that have tasted freedom don't want to be put in a position that they don't have that freedom. They don't have the ability to speak their mind, so that's scary. But what is really, truly disturbing about Donald Trump is the fact that we see him praising Putin. Now, I don't think he praises China, because, I don't want to call him a racist, but when COVID happened, he wasn't too kind to the Chinese, right? But we see, okay, he might be over that by now. I'll talk about the pros and cons of autocracies, right? So the cons are the obvious about controlled speech, controlled living, social crediting systems, and all sorts of ways that they can manipulate and control you. But here are the cons of it. Those are the cons, but here are the pros of it. It allows, if there's one government, one party, a single party government that pushes their own way, so we don't have any of this sort of like bipartisan issues. We don't have any sort of like, any sort of like rejection of the decision to move forward, and they just move in that direction. So that is the benefit of it, right? If you have a one leader that decides this is where the country needs to go, there's no opposition to that, and the country moves right away. You know what I'm saying? Like in a way, it's like even in a company, I think about a company like my company, like I decide what I want to make, every day. I don't have to, there's no bureaucracy. There's no like complications. I decide what I make. I sit down and make it, and it's smooth sailing. But here is the problem with that same thing, because like in President Xi's mind, that's the best system of government. But of course he's going to think that, because he's the one making the decisions. So here's the thing. What if the leader is a trash leader? And what if the direction that you're going is the wrong direction? Now, how many examples do we have of this? Russia invading Ukraine, Nigeria. I think about all the African countries that haven't succeeded because of dictatorship that is steering those countries in the wrong direction, not focused on the things that matter, would rather steal the money from the country than develop the country. So that's the problem with sort of this dictatorship / authoritarian sort of government. When you have the wrong leader, the wrong person in power, well, and there's no checks and balances, well, what direction is your country going? Nowhere. So as much as like President Xi can say that about China, okay, China's lucky to have a leader like him that has, and leaders like him that have taken, I think 700 million people out of poverty, taking a lot of people out of poverty, developed a nation, created wealth, all these things. They were lucky. Now, what happens when President Xi dies and somebody else is put in his position, And that person is incompetent. That person is stupid. That person never lived in a China that wasn't successful and doesn't understand how to earn it. Now that person becomes this spoiled brat that says, oh, well, this is the direction we're going into, and sends the country into poverty. How do you get out of that? That is what democracy gives. It gives you the checks and balances. In America, we did not like the way Trump was leading us. And so we replaced him, because that's what democracy allows. You can replace trashy, terrible leadership. That's what democracy allows. And that's what's important. So you, on one side, you could say, yeah, it's smooth sailing. There are no checks and balances if you're lucky enough to have the right leader. But what are the chances that you will have that? But the reason why democracy does matter is because even though it slows down the process of getting things into motion, at the end of the day, it ensures that we're always going in the right direction. We're always going in the, let me put it this way. We're going in the direction that the people have chosen. And if the person that has been chosen, the person the people has chosen, does not deliver the way that the people want him to deliver, they replace him with someone else that they want. And that is why I will always stand for democracy over an autocracy. Because look at the way Putin is leading Russia right now. Look at how the people are suffering financially. It must suck to live in Russia right now. You don't have, oh my God, think about all the people that have lost their jobs from like working at McDonald's, working at any of the American businesses. All the influencers that were creating content online that have lost their jobs. I used to discover so many Russian YouTubers. Now they can't even post on YouTube. They can't post on Instagram. They've lost their livelihood. Then in addition to that, the inflation, so the prices have gone up. People are suffering. I saw some, reports about people on holiday in or on vacation in Thailand, and they're stranded and they don't even have access to their money because MasterCard pulled all its services. MasterCard and Visa pulled all its services in Russia. That sucks. Right? So when you have the leadership that doesn't have the right direction, that sucks. So autocratic, I know President Xi doesn't believe that there's room for autocratic governance in the 21st century, but that's because he's leading China in a direction that is going to make them economically progressive. Let's put it that way, because I don't know that the Chinese people are even happy having him. But economically, China is going to flourish because that is his agenda. So yes, based on his opinion, because he gets to make all the rules, of course he believes in autocracy. But does the next guy next to him necessarily think that? Maybe not. There's this looming threat of autocracies. We have people like Justin Trudeau praising China's dictatorship. This is a Canadian. You don't expect that from the West. And Justin Trudeau is like the most loved, head of state. And to see what he's done with Canada during these protests, freezing of people's accounts, very similar to what the Nigerian president did, apart from the shooting of people. But that's what they did when people were protesting in Nigeria, blocking roads. They froze people's accounts. That's what they did in Nigeria. So it was kind of funny to see that happening in Canada too. But either way, it's a really interesting conversation about autocracies versus democracies. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. My name is Kenim, and see you next time. Peace.